Hello everyone, and by everyone I mean you, the random fuck that clicked on this video. Today I'm going to be going over my mostly complete Moze build for Borderlands 3. Right now, there's a lot of meta builds being posted all over the Reddits and the forums saying the same thing. Big shield, big damage, I want to be part of this, how do I do it? That's why we're here today, let's get into the build. So, for the first part of this build, we're going to be going over the guns and what types of choices you might want to be making with them. So obviously, the Flacker, you're playing an explosive-based character, you're probably going to want to be using it. The Flacker is just an overpowered weapon at this point in time, and with all of Moze's skills, it becomes even more potent. You can use a regular normal damage Flacker, but obviously on Mayhem 3 there will be different modifiers, and sometimes you're not going to be able to use a normal firing weapon. So you might want to get, like I have this radiation version, you can get any other element and the Flacker is still going to be insane. Radiation is my preference just because I think radiation is broken right now. You could also use the conference call. I have a radiation one, but like I said, it could be either one. The conference call is really good for this build too because we're going to be speccing into Moze's blue tree and it will proc explosives twice as many times per pellet because it shoots double the amount of pellets that normal shotguns would on their tag. The Butcher is just another insane gun. It constantly is shooting whenever you have it. It barely runs out of ammo. You do need to reload it with this build. I don't go for the ammo perks. I don't think they're worth it in this build because you'll see it's pretty hard to run out of ammo in my situation. Next up, these are your side grades, things that are good, but they're probably not going to be your bread and butter. We have the Masher. Masher is going to be one of my favorite guns to run on the side because it has 5 pellets, and with Moze's final keystone on her blue tree, that's 5 chances for you to proc a secondary explosive, and believe me, that shit hurts. These just recently got nerfed. I think it was yesterday when I'm recording this that they actually put out the patch and changed these a little bit. It wasn't enough to really damage them, though. I think they're really fucking good. The only ones that really received like a really bad nerf are the legendary versions because they were specifically targeting them. But I still think the Masher is a good option with this build. Mine's not the best parts yet even still, so I have a lot of room to grow with this one. Also, an honorable mention is the Headsplosion. If you want to just have fun running around headshot and stuff with this, believe me, it is worth it. It is so much fun. This gun, I randomly got this from Manvark and then ran through the entire rest of my campaign with it and just had a blast. I love this thing. Then you got an honorable mention also with the Hostile Crossroad. I have not seen anybody really talk about this gun too much, but with this Moze build, any gun that really can have pellets added to it is going to be a great weapon with this build just because of the secondary explosions. They don't count per shot, they count per pellet. So constantly when I'm shooting this thing, I'm just getting secondary explosions to go off, and if I'm hitting a flesh enemy, even on Mayhem 3, they are just... I only play on Mayhem 3, but... on Mayhem 3, they're just destroying everything. Okay, just as an aside at the end here, after the gun section, I don't think that there's any gun that's really bad with this build. I think you can use pretty much anything you want to. I think any doll weapon really works. Any weapon that has like a high fire rate or a lot of pellets or anything like that, you can probably use and it'll be good. I wouldn't recommend rocket launchers though. I don't think that the passive on the keystone, the blue keystone for Moze's build is very good for rocket launchers in general. I think guns like the Jericho and like maybe even the Quatomizer sometimes are really fucking insane at just like being able to mob enemies. But in this build, you're already going to be probably using a Flacker, so there's not going to be much need for a rocket launcher. So just in my opinion, I'd stay away from the rocket launchers. But you guys can do whatever you want. Obviously, this is just a video. Okay, so now that we've gotten all the guns taken care of, let's move on to the grenade. I think the grenade's probably one of the most important parts of this build just because you're probably going to be chucking them constantly. You'll see what I mean by that later. The best grenade that I've found for this build so far has been the Hex. You don't have to get a recurring one for it to be insane. It's just that the Hex, when you have the double version, it is just crazy. It's constant laser light shows all over your screen, and you never run out of grenades. Constant crits all over the place. I've had uh, instances where I just solo bosses on Mayhem 3 with just throwing this grenade, because why the fuck not? Um, I have a radiation version of this grenade. I'm not sure if it comes in different elements or not, because I don't think I've gotten another version of this. But if it does, I'm sure that it's just as good regardless, depending on what debuffs you get from Mayhem. The Stormfront's another good one. I like the Quasar. This is actually a terrible grenade mod. The Firestorm would be just as insane. And the fastball is one that I am like kind of on the fence about right now. Uh, it doesn't do the same damage as it did in Borderlands 2, where you could just like one-shot enemies and then blood explode an entire pack like on Krieg. But nonetheless, I think it's probably fine if you want to just screw around with it. The best one, though, by far, that I've seen for mobbing, for boss damage, for things of that nature, is going to be that Hex. And I think that the Firestorm would be just as good, if not better, on some bosses where it's just health, like raw health, like the red bar health. But I know for a fact that the Quasar is pretty insane for mobbing. I don't think it's very good for bossing, but if you're running around with a Quasar just to mob enemies, it is definitely a good grenade. Okay, now that we've gotten through the grenade mods, I can start to talk to you about class mods and what one you're probably going to want to use. There are two that work with this build, and they'll change based on your playstyle or like what type of mission you're doing. I personally almost always run this one though now, where all the healing that would be done to me is now gained to my shields, because when you're playing Moze with this build, you're not going to have any health. This is also ridiculously overpowered with the grenade mod that I was talking about, the Hex. When you use this grenade, it is constantly doing a DOT to all of the enemies that are around you, and you can throw as many as you want, so there is no chance in hell that your shields are going to go down. The other class mod that I mentioned, however, is the Blastmaster class mod, and this is kind of situational and based on your playstyle. It's very good, it's just not with this build. I would imagine you're going to have to change a little bit of the skill tree to try and make it so you don't have to reload as much. This perk for it would be that the longer that you are shooting the same magazine from your gun, you will get more splash damage. And when you're using guns like the Flacker, or you have the passive from the blue tree that makes it so you have secondary explosions, you want as much splash damage as you can get. However, with this build, we are going to be reloading a lot, and it wouldn't be used as much as the healing from the grenade. So now that we've gone over the grenades and the class mod, all that's left are the shields and relics, and I'm going to go over those at the same time because both of these will decide how you play the game. The Transformer is probably the best shield that you can use on Moze, just because it gives you shock resistance, and Moze will only have shield health. She won't have flesh health. You will always be at 1 health. Also, this shield is really good because it converts electrical damage into your actual shield. So anytime that you get hit by a shock proc, it will actually convert that into your shield, so it'll make you even more unkillable. The reason I can run the Transformer, though, is because I have the Deathless Relic. The Deathless Relic gives you it reserves all of your health but 1, and then it gives you an 100% boost to shield capacity, and it buffs your recharge rate and delay. Those last ones won't matter as much because we are going to be running around, throwing grenades at everything, and getting our shield back that way. The passives for that relic are really not that great. I enjoy the magazine size, but like I said earlier with the class mod, I would rather go for other things. Now, there's another loadout that I run that's not particularly my favorite, but it's still good. We have the front loader and then the grave relic or artifact. The front loader is a shield that reserves your max health. So when you're earlier on in the game and maybe you don't have a Deathless, you're probably going to have to run the front loader to be able to get to 1 health, and then reserve all of that into shields. This isn't a bad thing. It's still just as potent of a build. It's just you're not going to be immune to shock. And then the reason that we put on the Grave is because when we have reduced health, we have increased melee damage, weapon damage, and splash damage. And because we only have, it's not that we don't have health, it's that we have 1 health and we've reserved it all. So it counts that towards the percentage. So we would effectively be at like 0.000 something of our health. So the percentage buffs actually apply. So that is what makes this build actually really potent, is being at 1 health at all times. Okay, so now that I have chewed your ear off about all the guns and all the other junk, we can finally get into the skill tree. My skill tree is actually mainly dependent on the blue tree. This first row really honestly doesn't matter. I chose this because out of these perks, this is the one that would get the most use. It's slightly noticeable. I really don't like any of these perks. This was just the best of all the evils, I guess. This is the perk, though, that gives you back all of your grenades just because of the DOT on your hex. The splash damage, or whatever it is that it takes into account, whenever you hit something with it, it's every instance that it gets hit. It's not every time that you throw a grenade. So every time that a dot hits an enemy with your grenade, it has a chance of returning a grenade to you. That 6% chance doesn't look like a whole lot, but believe me, I can throw a grenade and it would hit 1 enemy, and I could have I could have 1 grenade, throw the grenade, and then get all of my grenades stock back just from that 1 grenade because of how ridiculous the DOT is and how it calculates it. The Torg cross promotion is actually really nice. It says 15% chance, but I honestly feel like it's more. That could be just because I'm using a flacker and it counts every one of those pellets. But it is definitely strong, and it's well worth the 5 points. The grenades having a chance to score critical hits is actually so busted. With the other class mod that I had it so that it could get up to 5 points, and it would be a 50% chance to get critical hits, and that was just crazy. That was before Pipe Bomb got nerfed too, so it was just destroying bosses, and God, I can't even believe that that was a thing. The Vampire skill is actually one of the most important in the entire build. It restores 20% of your missing health per enemy hit, so every time that you throw a grenade and it hits somebody, it's going to be restoring your health. You have 1 health, and it's going to restore that percentage that's missing every time, or 20% of what's missing every time. So just imagine how much shield you're going to be getting back every time you hit somebody with a grenade. The why can't I carry all these is not really that important, actually. I spec'd into that because I didn't realize how broken this was with grenades that have dots. You can put this into any other thing in this tree that you want to. I would probably put it into... God, I don't even know. All of these are kind of useless with this build. But maybe Auto Bear. Maybe get cooldown every time you get a kill. I don't know. It's probably these two would be the ones that I would put points into. The to the last perk is actually so silly. You can get back up with the Hex Grenade almost instantly. It is just that overpowered. And you can just spam them, so it's not like you have to worry about it. The Short Fuse is the main source of all of your explosive damage in this build, other than the Flacker, obviously. But with other guns that don't necessarily have an explosive effect to them, you are going to be running this because it has a 20% chance to add a secondary explosion to your bullets that will do 75% of the gun damage as well. That's why earlier when I was talking about pellet weapons, I was saying they were so potent, because every one of those pellets has a 20% chance. If you're firing 5 pellets, it's not technically like a 100% chance, but think of it that way, and it's pretty much you're going to be proccing a secondary explosion every time you pull the trigger, maybe even 2. So it's a very strong and very potent keystone. I really don't use the mech for anything other than a panic button, in case I maybe would possibly ever lose health with this build. I would instantly start my mech and jump in, and then I would start shooting everything with the Vanquisher rockets, because with this skill for the Vanquisher rocket, you can make enemies that you hit with them take more damage. And when you jump back out of your mech, you could have been fighting maybe an anointed Goliath or something like that that isn't obviously going to die to your shitty mech. You jump out and then you hit it with a flak shot. That thing's probably going to die, just because it's taking flak damage, your short fuse damage. It's taking extra splash damage. You probably have grenades going around it, and then on top of that, it's weaker to every bit of damage that you're doing to it from anything at that point in time. So now that we've gone over the blue tree, let's head over to the red tree. You're not going to be using any of the action skills or any of its augments in this, just because, well, the red tree is honestly not my favorite, and I don't think that it's good compared to the Vanquisher. We're going to be speccing into armored infantry just for literally raw gun damage and damage reduction. There's not much to be said about it. The security bear is kind of nice when you jump into your mech and maybe you need to sit in there for a little while because you want your shield to recharge. It's perfectly fine. Go into that. You have to waste points a little bit in this, so why not get the security bear? The Vladov and Ingenuity. You get max shield and shock resistance. The shock resistance isn't why we go into it. We go into it for the 30% max shield. You would want the shock resistance if you were using the front loader, like I explained earlier, but if you're using the transformer, it's pretty useless. The thin red line, okay, so this is where it might get a little confusing to some people. When you're using the front loader and you're using thin red line, this is how you get to 1 HP and then use the grave. It will calculate actually 120% of your health and then put that into shield. So it will overcap your health and then and put it into your shield. You won't go into negative health though. When you're using the Deathless Relic that makes it so you have 1 health regardless of anything else, this perk will still actually work. It will calculate it based off of your max health and then convert that into added max shield. So it actually is worth getting even if you're using Deathless. We had to waste a few points, so I put some points in Drowning in Brass. The negative fire rate, I don't even notice, to be honest with you. It's so minimal that it's not a really big deal. And then we go into a full can of whoop-ass just because in that panic situation that I mentioned earlier, you're going to want your shield to recharge, and you're probably going to want to get out of your mech as fast as possible because it's so goddamn useless. So you want your shield recharge rate to be higher. I feel like this skill is actually pretty good, whether you're using it as a panic button or not, because you're probably going to go into it without full shield anyway. We don't go into experimental munitions just because bonus incendiary damage is really not that great with this build. I wouldn't say. Then we have the Behind the Iron Curtain perk, which you could go that, I guess, but there's really, you could go that instead of Phalanx Doctrine, but in any world that I'm living in, I would rather have Phalanx Doctrine. Desperate Measures is actually where the majority of your gun damage will come from with this build, because you are always going to be at 1 health. It will calculate it all the way up to 83% at all times whenever you're 1 health. So as long as you're living, you're going to have a bonus 83% gun damage. And with other class mods, you can get higher. I've seen up to 120 something, I think, before. With my class mod that I currently have, I only get up to 83. I could probably find one that's better. I just haven't yet. I got lucky and got points for Phalanx Doctrine with my class mod, so I put my points into Phalanx Doctrine. I feel like regardless, you probably are putting your last few points into this, or maybe some points in this tree. Possibly. I wouldn't if I was you. But the final perk on this tree is good with other builds where you're not going to be at 1 health. when you're at 1 health with this build and the shields drop, it says that it would restore 40% of your max shield. I have had it happen multiple times where instead of putting me back up at 40% max shield, it just kills me, and it doesn't register fast enough that my shield's depleted before I'm dead and took more damage than I should have based on this ability. It's also kind of a skill that you're banking on losing your health and like dying with, so it's really not like the best skill in general. When you're using Moze with maybe you're just using her with minus 60% health, I could see this as being good. It's just not with this build. That concludes the skill tree portion. I could go over the Guardian rank, but I'm purposely not putting points into my Guardian ranks yet because if I do this, I can't make a melee build for Amara. If I do this, I will constantly kill... Oh, okay. I didn't even know that was a thing. Well, I'm learning things even during the video. I'm happy that they're fixing this. This is a huge bug, and it's terrible to play with friends with. You could fill this tree out, and it wouldn't be an issue, but you can see all my bonus stats and things like that, what I prioritize. I think recoil reduction is useless. I think shield recharge delay is kind of useless in the sense that I'm going to be making a melee build, so I don't want to have recharge delay. Yeah, I think that's about it for all of the skill trees. I'm going to show you guys some gameplay. I'm going to be fighting Captain Trant, and then I'll end the video.